Hello and welcome to Masters of Change. If I were to give you a task, change this, would you say that it is possible? If it was a physical task, you would say, yeah, I might change the settings of this room. Maybe I might change the curtains or do something else. But if people would say, starting tomorrow, this is something that you should change in your life, probably a little bit of your lifestyle, many of us find it quite challenging. Let alone if people would say, you will have to wake up at 4 in the morning every day, people would say, how could that happen? But for some, it is something that they have mastered it so easily that they don't see that these changes were difficult ones to make. Let us hear to these stories of change, how these changes have transformed them and made them people that they are today. Today, we have Sister Tamsin joining us from Australia. Tamsin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shri. Very nice to be here.
Just for our audience to find out a little bit about you, who you are, where do you come from, what kind of childhood you had, so that they know where you are from and what you do now.
Okay, well, I've had an eclectic life, let's say. But my earliest influences were from the age of about 2 to the age of 7, 6 maybe. I grew up on top of a mountain about 20 minutes outside of a very small country town known as Bega. And I was there with my parents and we lived a very simple life. We had a little hut and we grew all our own food. We didn't have any electricity, no running water, no telephone. And we didn't even have a bathroom. We used to just, it was very natural living in the forest.
Yeah.
And you could say that my playground was the forest, and because I was an only child, I had a sister, but she grew up in America, so I grew up as an only child. And I would say that the flora and the fauna, the trees and the animals and the plants and the insects and the birds were my friends, so that had a very big impact on me. Then I moved to the city when I was about 7 or 8, and I discovered not everybody talks to animals and has trees talk to them, so I stopped mentioning that at school. And then both my parents were actors, so I had a very creative upbringing. It was very free-spirited. And actually there was a lot of influence from India because my mother and also other actors followed Baba Muktananda. So we had pictures of Baba Muktananda around, and I used to meditate, and apparently one time Baba Muktananda put his shawl around me, which was a big deal, but I didn't understand at the time. I was just a child. And so I was always interested in Eastern philosophy and India, and so there was that kind of influence. So I suppose after then, well, I went to a lot of different schools. I went to 8 different schools, and then I went to 3 universities. And now I have a PhD, and I've worked as an actress first, then as a paramedic, which I loved, then as an anthropologist, doing field work and learning about people and our relationship with other species, how spirituality helps in disasters, things like that. And then most recently, I worked as a senior policy advisor for a member of parliament in Victoria. So it's been quite a journey. quite a journey. So yeah, so that's in a summary. That's a bit about me.
The kind of experiences we all have, it shapes where our life is today. All the people who have walked in, the choices that we have made, the influences that other people have had upon us, shapes us in a way that we might not understand, but they do. How do you see the influence of people who were around you whilst you were growing up, who were already spiritual, and they were following some Eastern thought of meditation, and you were also practicing meditation? So how did that influence you as a teenager and then as a young adult?
That's an interesting question. You're absolutely right, Shri. The relationships really do, they form us and shape us. And there was one lovely man, Peter Noble, and he lived with my mother and I for a while, and his partner, when nobody had much money, so we all had to live together. And my father was away working. And I actually met him. He was in a show that my father was in. My father played Pontius Pilate in Jesus Christ Superstar. I can say that was my only religious upbringing. It was Jesus Christ Superstar, the rock and roll musical, and Godspell, the other musical. But anyway, Peter Noble was an actor from that show. And he was always very interested in Eastern philosophy. The idea of the soul, the idea of God being beyond the physical form, God being one, God being universal and not confined by a religion or an identity. And the reason he was so important to me is because I met him when I was 5, and he passed away, or as we say, he left the body a few years ago. But I had a very close relationship with him from when I was 5 to when I was about 14. And those are years where you really develop your sense of who you are. And there are a lot of other influences, like, you know, when you find out you're a girl and there are certain things you can't do, and then you know, a lot of things shape you in, they limit you. But Peter, and I used to call him Pedro, even when I was a very young girl, he always treated me as his equal or as a peer, and we would have wonderful spiritual conversations. So it was the ability to have an adult, a grown-up who I really respected, who had been on his own spiritual journey for many years, the fact that he was interested in my spiritual development and opened the possibility for me to have genuine spiritual conversations and ask questions, and he even asked questions of me. So that gave me a lot of confidence in the world of the spirit. There were other ways that I didn't have much confidence, but that was very important for me in continuing my spiritual inquiry.
Since you speak about inquiry, as a child, each one has a curious mind. But later on, as we grow up, thanks to education and how society really treats us, we tend to come to a point where we, as teenagers or young adults, question everything around us, trying to find a purpose for our own life. But it does not happen just at that age, but it happens for some people at a later point in life. Some people call it midlife crisis, but
yes, true.
But at various instances, people look back upon their lives, take a pause, really rethink what they've been doing, where are we headed, what we should do later in our life, possibly choosing a career or just thinking about what we should do with our life next. Apart from these points, there are also instances where people are drawn to look for a greater meaning for life. People, if you may call it, we may call it a spiritual quest, a yearning, a want to find out why we are here, why is the world like this.
Yes.
Some people might be looking for God, a truth or justice or whatever it could be. Did that kind of quest or that kind of calling come to you?
So interesting you asked that question, because I had that burning need to understand when I was about 10 years old. And it actually happened because of I had quite a temper as a child. And I couldn't understand the reason for my temper. I didn't want to be angry at my mother because I loved her. But I would, and you know, my father was away a lot, and I mean, all kinds of other influences. But for whatever reason, you know, and as a child you internalise things and you don't really understand them. And I remember going to the church down the road because I thought it's a holy place, let me go there. And I always believed in God, partly because of my conversations with Pedro. But essentially I always believed in a divine power anyway. So I went to the church and I remembered seeing a film where very devoted people lie on the floor. Now I know the word is genuflect, like, you prostrate yourself. So I was desperate for answers. So I lay on the floor face down and I said, God, please tell me why I have this temper. Can you please explain to me why, when all I want to do is be happy and give happiness to others, why I'm sad and I'm giving sorrow? I don't understand. How can this be? And then I said, I'm not the only one. There's many like me. And the world is filled with people who want to be happy and give happiness, but yet we're stuck somehow and we're sad and we're giving sorrow. So come on, like, what's going on? So that was a real moment. And then, of course, you hope for the thunderbolt from the sky or the, the vision or something, and there's just silence. And at that point, I wasn't wanting a return. I was just it was a beseeching. It was a turning point where I thought, I need to understand. I need to understand this. And then when I was 15, I gave God an ultimatum. I'd kind of waited for 5 years. I said, come on, I'm waiting. And I remember all my friends were going on a school camp, and I also wanted to go on the school camp, but I thought, no, I'm going to spend 2 weeks in silence. This is going to be my practice. 2 weeks without any of my friends, just in silence, waiting. I said, God, I need your answer. I need it within the next 2 weeks. Of course, the 2 weeks came and went, and there was no, they were like crickets. Yeah. That sounded like I didn't get the answer I wanted. So then I just said, okay, whether you exist or not, I don't care. I'm out. Not that I wasn't still interested, but I changed my focus, my attention. School, boys, fun, this, that, going out. But I remember that age of 10 as being a real turning point, where somehow I planted a question, I planted a seed, and although the sapling didn't grow when I wanted it to grow, the sapling did grow.
So people would want to know what happened to that seed and when did it grow?
Of course, the timing wasn't as per my wish. I was a young actress and I was 18 years old. I'd just finished high school. I had the lead role in a television series, and I had a boyfriend, and I was very kind of into my own world. I don't want to use the word self-obsessed because it sounds really negative, but I think when you're 18 and you're trying to work out what it means to be a grown-up, and you're suddenly out of school and you're expected to be, all these adult things are happening to you. The focus is on yourself, not really others So I was very much like that. And, I still I've had a lifelong interest in things of the spirit, so that didn't change, but I'd left it to one side. And I was living with my father. I'd moved to Sydney to work on this television series, and my father was also working on a television series. Actually, just as a side thing, they were competing shows, and mine won. So I was really happy about that. It was like which show will become a series, and mine became a series. But anyway, that's another story. But it was a nice, pleasant, little tussle with me and my dad. So anyway, I was living with him, and the woman he was seeing at the time received an invitation to a meditation program for actors, and it was at the Raj Yoga Centre. We didn't really use the word Brahma Kumaris back then. We called them Raj Yoga Centres in Australia, at Bondi Beach. And it said something which I wasn't that interested in, and then it said free vegetarian lunch provided. I thought, okay, I'll go to that.
Yeah.
And so my dad, Robin, and myself, we went along to the program. And it was Anthony Strano was actually given the program, and he was a very good friend, and he's since also left the body, passed away. But He was a very good friend and a really great teacher from Australia, lived in Greece. And honestly, I can't remember the content of the day, but there was something about the sisters. There was something about the people there. And I didn't know what it was, but there was some quality they had. So I wanted to find out more. But it was just like a whisper in my mind. It didn't really land as a big urgent need to find out more or anything. So it was just this quiet whisper of like, who are these sisters? Like, what's going on here? But then my dad was like being very, because he was a very authoritative actor, very like quite famous at the time. So he was asking all these questions and challenging these notions and being very alpha male, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so then we left and that was it, and I never heard anything else. But then within a couple of weeks, his behaviour started to change. Now, my dad and I at that point, because he wasn't around very much between when I was like 10 and 18 so much, so we didn't really communicate. We were just learning to communicate when I was 18 as grown-ups and learning to talk to each other. So there were a lot of things that we didn't talk about. And one of the things he didn't tell me was that he'd done the course at the Raj Yoga Centre and he was changing his life. So I just kind of found out with very interesting things that happened. So for instance, I came back from filming one day and in his apartment, he had all these great artworks. All the artworks were removed and all the pictures, starting with the bouquet of virtues, were lying in the corridor. Not just the bouquet of divine virtues, but Lakshmi and Narayan and Ravan holding the world with the claws and the blood, and then the Kumbhakarna with the oil can in the ear. And I was a bit confused. I didn't know what it all meant, but I thought, okay, maybe he's into cartoons because they've got that cartoon look. I mean, I love that, kind of art, but there was no explanation as to what was happening.
Yeah, this was something new.
It was something new. All of a sudden, he started referring to me as sister, which was very confusing. And then, and another thing, I used to make a special porridge because my dad at the time, he just needed some gentle food on his stomach. So I used to make millet and oat porridge or something for our breakfast. And every day I would make it, every day we would eat it. This one time I made it and his was in front of him, I ate mine, and he was looking very uncomfortable. And he wouldn't eat it. I said, Pa, why are you not eating the food I made? He said, oh, because you've put impure vibrations into it. So now I didn't know what that meant. I didn't really understand what impure vibrations meant. And this is something that, I've learned since that we meditate in a spiritual consciousness. And so he put it in a very crass way, I must say. And also as he was learning, because he was new and he didn't understand what everything meant either, but he didn't explain anything to me. And then the final thing was when he left a piece of paper on my bed and it said, 16 points on how to become an Avyat Farastat like Prajapita Brahma. And the only words I understood were 16 points on how to become, and I didn't know any of the other words. But then there was the phone number at the bottom, the phone number of the Raj Yoga Centre. So I thought, and the other thing, he'd thrown away all his records. He had all these really cool records from the 1970s and 60s and 80s. He got rid of all his music. So he had obviously made the decision that he was going to completely change his life, but he didn't tell me anything. So I found out with these little bits of odd information that were not explained properly. So anyway, I thought, okay, I have to find out why my dad has gone so peculiar. Let me find out. So I called the Raj Yoga Centre and I ended up doing the course. And as soon as I walked into the Raj Yoga Centre, there was that quality again, which I couldn't explain, but I now would say it's the quality of purity, which we often don't have a good concept for in the West, I don't think. We talk about pure water, but we don't really have it as a concept. But it was a very refined spiritual quality of love, hard to explain. But I did the course, and a lot of it made sense. A lot of it resonated with me because of my early interest, my conversations with Pedro. A lot of the concepts were there. I already believed in God. I already felt that God was an incorporeal point of light, conscious light, that God was love. So a lot of the concepts weren't completely new, but the package was new. And then the disciplines were new. And so
when you say, since you already had that kind of understanding, with the conversations of spiritual conversations that were involving about the soul, about God, and how you had already had that kind of conversation, many people find it difficult to come to a new understanding. Suddenly, when somebody introduces you to the concept of the soul or something which is a spiritual understanding, for many people it could have been difficult. But since you said that you have had that kind of background, it was easier for you. But since you already knew certain things, certain aspects of spiritual understanding, let's say, were the things in the Brahma Kumaris teaching at that time when you say you went to the Raj Yoga Center, that you felt that this is something that I was looking for, this is something that that clicks, that feels like, this is not something that I've heard anywhere else?
Yes, sure, it was a bit like that. I mean, there were two things, I guess. First was that, as I mentioned before, there was a quality, an indefinable quality. And I thought, there's something, I want to be like these people. But there was also when I was 10 years old and lying in the church, desperate for understanding. I felt that there was something about their behaviour as well, and I knew, like I know on a spiritual path there are a series of disciplines. Like with anything we want to do, if we want to become a great athlete, we undertake particular disciplines. I studied martial arts for a long time. You undertake certain disciplines to acquire a certain capacity. So it's the same with anything, the same with a spiritual path. So it was the fact that not only was there a quality, but there was a lifestyle that could promise inner change. And that's what I've been looking for since I was 10 years old. To understand why am I as I am, and how can I be how I wish to be? And there were not really any answers to that. And, it's great if you can take a pill, but you can't, we can't do that. And obviously we don't want to do that. We want any change to be deep, true and authentic. And the Brahma Kumaris seemed to me to offer a path that was deep, true and authentic. So that's why I thought, let me find out some more.
You said that the journey of who we are, finding out why are we like this, and to come to a point that, no, I want to be a better version of me. It requires a great deal of transformation, undergoing a great length of effort making. Because many of us want to change, but we don't know how to. And like you said, coming to the Brahma Kumaris helped you to make those changes. What kind of changes did you see after becoming a meditator, understanding the aspects of what Brahma Kumaris were giving you as understandings? How did you change? What changes did you see in yourself happening?
Well, first of all, I think more than transformation, it takes patience, is, I would say, the main thing. Because it's not, in my experience, it's not like you think it's going to be. It's not a straightforward process, but it is an adventure like no other, I can say. And sometimes it's really difficult. It's difficult only because it takes a lot of honesty. And one of the main things I learned is that, there are parts of ourselves that we don't like very much. I think with all of us, there are maybe parts that we're ashamed of, parts that we don't like, parts that we would prefer to keep hidden. But on a path that's deep, true and authentic, we have to accept if we want to completely change the entirety of who we are, we have to accept the entirety of who we are. And that means accepting with as much love and grace and care and compassion the parts that we wish didn't exist. Actually, even more so than the parts that we do recognise as positive. And that, I think, is a big thing, because self-acceptance is one of the greatest. It's a quality, but it's also a skill. It's the ability to turn towards things that scare us, things that are ugly, things that are uncomfortable, because that's what God does. God doesn't come to us because we're beautiful. He comes to us because we're ugly. And I don't want to say he, I want to say that one, because God is beyond gender also. So she, he, the mother, the father, our supreme parent, that one comes to us because we are broken and dark and lost and ugly, and that one says to us, "Come, my child, I love you. Give me all of who you are. I want everything of who you are." But unless we offer that everything to that one, we must offer everything to that one to experience the complete love of that one. And it's that love that creates the intimacy that all souls want. That's why we go into relationships, because we want to be cherished, we want to be adored, we want to be understood. But as long as we hide parts of ourselves from ourselves and from God, those parts can't receive the love, and it's actually those parts that need to heal and to be changed through love. So I think my deepest learning has been self-acceptance, and that it's an absolute requirement for transformation. And self-acceptance, we have to be patient. It doesn't happen overnight, but we just have to start again. And if we fail, if we perceive it as a failure, I don't think it's a failure, but we do things and sometimes we think we've made a mistake or we failed. The ability to start again and to keep going.
It's very beautiful how you say that with such sincerity of what you have seen yourself and what you have done for your own self, and how you share it with that honest heart that other people could also take value from it by doing this unconditional act of giving all in. You receive so much, you receive more light to all that is dark, and so that also clears up. When you said that as a child, you asked that question, when you asked that question that, why am I like this? And if I want to become something, a better version of me. Did you see that change happen? Did those issues of let's say how you had a temper, did that change?
Definitely. But it doesn't change, it's like we have to unpack, we have to uncover. I'm an anthropologist, right? So the anthropologist, along with the archaeologist, they go digging and they go investigating and exploring, and they get the little brush, and, or they inquire deeply into the human phenomenon. So in some ways it is like that. In some ways, the decision, a sincere decision and a sincere choice that, yes, I sincerely want to change, not because anyone's telling me, but sincerely from my heart. And if I share that commitment with God, then it's like we plant a seed, and we may forget we've planted that seed, but that seed is not forgotten by the Almighty and by the ocean of love. So, and I understand that God and drama, like the world as we know it, the comings and the goings and the colours and the forms and the scenes and the actors, work in harmony with the creator spirit, with God. So when in the drama we make a commitment or a promise, then that promise is heard, understood by the Almighty, then the drama or in other words, our lives will ensure that the opportunities arise for us to transform in the ways that we wish.
Yeah.
And it is to do with the sincerity. I think we have to be really sincere. If we do it because someone's telling us, oh, you should be like this, the same things won't open up, the same opportunities. Sincerity is a big part of karma, I think. We have to be truly sincere and honest.
It also reminds me of how small acts of kindness, small acts of favor, sometimes even not asked, but a tiny seed planted by someone so many years ago, today has grown to a tree and it offers us fruits unconditionally.
Yes.
And as much as it has taken that time, it is bearing fruit today.
Yes.
It has taken its own time to come to this point. And our lives too are on the same path, that we have planted a seed of good intention and it will bear fruit, but it will take its own time.
Yeah.
And like you said, it requires patience, and cultivating that is a beautiful journey in its own. And your journey would inspire so many who are listening to this conversation. It gives so much of hope that, yeah, there are issues that we might be facing today, but with a little bit of work, it is possible to change.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for coming in today, and I believe this conversation has been so intimate, so honest, and so sincere. And I believe the words that have come out of this conversation, if I were to put it on a wall, I would say, like you said in the beginning of the conversation, what your father did put up was a picture of a bouquet of divine virtues.
Yes.
All of that would come out. Thank you nonetheless for taking time out.
Thank you, Shri.
And I believe it has been an amazing conversation. Many people will take definite inspirations from this.
Thank you, Shri.
Thank
I've
you for
enjoyed it
doing
very much. Thank you.
Friends, that was this episode of Masters of Change. Listening to the story of transformation is always amazing. It reminds us our innate quality to be a master of change ourselves, our ability to change for better. Tamsin's story talks about the childhood that she had. Many people would wonder if we could get that kind of childhood today. But our instances, as different as they might be, give us an opportunity to see how each of us are connected, how each of us resonate with the similar thoughts of patience, of love, of developing a better understanding, and of becoming better people. That's all for today. I will see you again in the next episode. Until then, take care.